So, hello everybody to another Soundbites edition. Today, I would like to talk about the question if we live in the golden age of gaming. A couple of years ago, I took part in a podcast called Guns, Dice, and Butter, where I was asked about did I feel that gaming in the then noughties and now in the second decade of the 21st century was different from gaming earlier and what the differences were. And of course, there are plenty of differences. And then the other day on BGG, I found this thread where people were saying, do we live in the golden age of gaming? And there was a toing and froing and saying, well, actually, it's not the golden age. A lot of things were a lot better in the old days when you had plenty of Avalon Hills games that you could buy. But of course, again, Avalon Hill produced for a niche market. They produced quite a lot of war games. And there was then this grognard exchange in that particular thread where people were really coming to loggerheads about how good the old Avalon Hill titles really were. And somebody said there were plenty of duds, but now people are kind of, distance lends enchantment to the past, and people are kind of waxing lyrically about how great Avalon Hill was because a lot of their titles are not available anymore. And then there was a list in a different forum where somebody actually said, these are some Avalon Hill titles around certain war games, and they have now been re-implemented, not the games themselves, but the battles or whatever it was that Avalon Hill was modeling at the time in that particular game. And if one were to compare the two, probably the newer game with the newer mechanics might actually win out. And I'm not going to go into this discussion at all, but I would like to think about and talk to you about the history of gaming really over the last 44 years or 40 years, because that's the time span that I can look back on and actually think about and talk about. Now, in Germany, we've always had, since I can remember, and I just did some research there, the first Spiel des Jahres went to Hase and Igel by David Parlett, and it was awarded in 1979. Now, the Spiel des Jahres is an award that goes to games each year since 1979. And a lot of those games are games, when I look at the list, that I would have played myself. Sagaland, Scotland Yard, Dampfrost, which is a trains game, if you like. It's probably the earliest version of Ticket to Ride. Sherlock Holmes, Crime Cabinet, which apparently has now been re-released or was re-released 2 or 3 years ago. Things like The Settlers of Catan, El Grande, Tikal, Carcassonne, Puerto Rico was nominated, Alhambra, Turn on Taxes. This is also a game that would have made it across the Atlantic. Rainer Knizia alone was nominated 4 times with games like Dixit is on the list as well. That's a French game. Quirkle is on it. Hanabi, Camel Up. So not just German games, but over the years, we did see something in Germany which was a lot, I think, which seemed strange to people in the United States especially, that people would go out specifically to buy the game that was made by a certain person. So the concept of an author being associated with a game was kind of alien to a lot of people. So like you would go, oh, have you read the latest, I don't know, Stephen King? People would go, I wonder what Rainer Knizia is up to. Let's go to Spiel Essen and see what he's got in the pipeline. And so gaming when I was a child would have revolved mainly around your standard card games like Rome, Canasta. I knew some people when I was older who played bridge, but that wasn't really a big thing in Germany. at least not in my age bracket. I think back then it was mainly played by older people or even the elderly. Then, of course, games like Ludo, Snakes and Ladders, The Game of Life, Clue. Um, of course, dare I say it, the one that we all hate, so I won't name it, where everybody goes, okay, if people talk about games, then they think of this game, and it's not really a game. Although, of course, Monopoly, and there I said it, is a game. Although it's not a hobby game, it's still a game, and it's been around for a very, very long time, and it's been selling great. And it's made a lot of money for whoever holds the license at the moment. I don't even know who that is. So I would say that my early gaming life was dominated by games like, the Monopoly kind of game where you don't have to invest too much except for a couple of hours. It's very simple to learn, and most people play it and make mistakes. And it's ephemeral in its, I would say, experience. You don't know what to do. You have a couple of hours to kill for Christmas. Everybody's around. Auntie Betty has been sitting next to the brandy for a good while now, so she's in a good mood now. So just break out the old game, and everybody sits down. And you kill a couple of hours. A child that loses starts crying and is then escorted to their room and told, you can't have your Christmas presents if you don't know how to lose. It's your staple thing. And then, of course, there was the other side of gaming, which was probably a lot less, I would say, prevalent in Germany, and that is wargaming. Now, the reason why wargaming is probably a lot less, or was a lot less common in Germany, was not because people wouldn't want to play, but a lot of the games, like, let's say, ASL and so on, concentrate on the Second World War. And especially with games like ASL, there were two things. On the one hand, I think psychologically speaking, there's probably not that much of an incentive to replay games related to a war which led to, essentially all of Europe going up in flames. And then, of course, in addition to the actual war, you had the Holocaust and all of that. So I think there would have been a reluctance in Germany, at least, to say, oh, yeah, let's play a game about the Second World War. And in addition, and this is something that is actually still prevalent today, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day when I was in Germany and we were playing ASL. Some of the counters of ASL contain Nazi insignia. So, for example, the double S rune for the SS. And this is actually illegal. You cannot display this in Germany. And when you import stuff from the United States, it's usually held in customs and you have to pay customs. That's normal, and it happens in Europe all across the board. Every so often they will just hold a shipment to you, and then you have to go and, if you like, redeem it, and you have to pay customs, which is fair enough. But also in Germany, they open the shipment, and they opened this shipment of ASL materials, and this is a true story, and they took out the counters, they saw the SS runes, and they actually took a penknife and cut those off because it's forbidden. You cannot have that, And of course, that completely destroyed that set of ASL counters because you can't use them anymore. And he was actually telling me that there is a company that makes ASL related stuff. I don't know the name of the company, but it's the one that has this little rat character. I think it's cute. And he said, oh, well, I don't think that's the intention. I said, yeah, but then if the intention is that the rat isn't cute, then they failed abysmally because it is very cute. But he said, they also produce stuff which is Germany friendly, which you can import because it avoids some of the Nazi insignia. So I think this is also a reason why maybe ASL never really took off in the early days when I was still a child. And then, of course, like I said, there was the Spiel des Jahres. There was what we would call designer games, maybe games that have brought about this description of the Euro game, worker placement, very abstract games too, where you don't really have maybe a lot of theme. I mean, the Settlers does have some kind of theme, but it's not really that impressive a theme. It's really about the mechanics that drive the game. Whereas something like, I don't know, Arkham Horror is really about the storytelling. I mean, the mechanics are so sometimes cumbersome that most people have house ruled the hell out of this game, and basically it doesn't really matter how you play it as long as you tell a good story. The same goes, for example, as well for things like Runebound, and I'm going to do a Runebound video this weekend. So I think in the 90s, really, for me, this divergence became apparent. That you had games that are very different from your staple, but that are still not what I would call a Euro. And they started coming online. And then, of course, and this is the important word here, coming online, the internet happened. And I think a lot of stuff changed with the internet. And it's basic things like, for example, we've got Board Game Geek. And when you, and as I've been a member since 2006, so that's just 11 years now. But even just the information that I've gotten from there, the materials that I've downloaded, the materials that I've provided, the conversations that I've engaged in, the games that I've bought from or through Board Game Geek, the games that I've sold through Board Game Geek, sometimes make you forget how niche our hobby still is. Because when you go there, you're just surrounded by people who have similar or identical interests to you. And you can talk about things that everybody else will go, what are you actually talking about? What does roll to move mean? And why the hell would you actually have a discussion around it? And so I think the internet has changed all of our lives, but it has definitely changed the life of gaming. And I would say in various ways. Number one, you have the possibility of connecting with people around the globe who are into this niche like you are, and that means you're suddenly available. You have a actually, this is quite irritating because I'm listening to myself as I'm talking, so I've got this new setup and I can hear myself twice. So you have this community available to you, which makes you forget that you are probably in a huge minority. Nobody really cares about gaming that much. A lot of people still consider gaming kids play. They don't understand it. If I tell them, well, I've got probably around 500 games and expansions, and if I even just add up Lord of the Rings, I'll probably end up with 1,200, 1,500 euros just for this game. They will go, are you insane? And then when you tell them, well, there's a new game coming out, or a 1.5 version of a game called Kingdom Death Monster, and it sells at $1,600, they will not understand it. So there is this. You have the possibility of talking to people, getting to know people who share your interest, but who you might never see, which is quite interesting because most people think that board gaming is several people sitting around a board and moving around little meeples, which is true, but it leaves out the fact that a lot of games, even most recently, have come out that are either completely solo or have a solo version, not just a variant that has been tacked on, but are meant to be played solo, either using different rules or the same rules, but it's more like the multiplayer has been integrated, but it is a solo game to begin with. This can either be achieved by having a true solo game like some of the D-Day stuff, which is meant to be played solo, or by using apps like the most recent Descent app, Road to Legend, or also the second edition of Mansion of Madness, which is completely app-based. It doesn't have the wherewithal to play it opposed like the first edition, because the whole idea of the gamekeeper cards are missing. They have been removed, unlike Descent second edition, where you do it's actually sorry, it's is it third edition? Anyway, the most recent Descent edition, where you still have the keeper cards, but you can also play it fully solo by using the app. And of course, they've brought out 3 solo versions, 3 solo adventures that you can play where you don't need an app. So here again, the internet is helping, because they put the app on Steam, you download whatever you need, and then you can play. So that would not have been possible in a pre-internet era. So not only can you connect with people and exchange with them and make friends. I mean, most people that are listening to this are people that I will probably never meet in my life, but I've met plenty of people online through my gaming hobby, like Pencil Paulie, Cat Weasel, if you're listening, hi, Fushigimemi, and of course the Kevin, the Australian who lives in Texas, and who is my wargaming guru. And plenty of other people who connect to me through Board Game Geek or through my channel. Then, of course, there are the channels themselves on YouTube, where you can get everything from Watch It Played, hailing from, I think it's the east coast of Canada. And then, of course, we have Hot Gates Gaming. They look into things like the Hobbit strategy board game, the Lord of the Rings strategy board game, which is a GW product. And then you have other channels that I subscribe to, like Black Belt Gaming, who does solo gaming, not wargaming, but gaming. The Lonesome Gamer, where you just see playthroughs. They don't explain the rules, not necessarily, sometimes they do, but they actually allow you to vicariously engage with somebody else who's playing a game. And a lot of people go, what, you actually go online and watch someone play a board game? And the answer is, hell yes. I mean, there are millions of people who pay good money and pay, I mean, incredible amounts of money to watch 22 people run around on a green pitch kicking a ball. Of course I would watch somebody play a board game if it's a board game I'm interested in, or if I like that particular person's channel. I mean, for example, a Lonesome Gamer, I just like his storytelling as he goes through the games. I will not watch every single game that he's got, because some of them I'm simply not interested in. But I'm also happy to watch things that I don't know anything about, because I like his style. Or you've got the, I forget their name now. There's Off the Cuff Gaming in England. I really love their Lord of the Rings playthroughs, the LCG. They also do Arkham Horror, the LCG, which I really dislike, but I still like watching people play it. I would never buy it again, but, you know, it's a different experience. And so, yes, you get an idea of how games are played, what kind of games are out there. You get an idea of new mechanics or re-implementation of mechanics just by watching people play games. And this is something that you couldn't experience without the internet. Then, of course, you also have technical help that the internet can provide. Some board games have been implemented for Vassal, and there are plenty of board games actually that have been implemented for Vassal. You can basically play them online, either solo if you want to, or you can also get people to log in and then you play. I've done it once with Kevin Sharp. We played Panzergruppe Guderian, which is a game I totally love, and it was really nice to play with someone. I've also tried the asynchronous way of actually playing Red Winter. So basically you make your move, You send the log to the other person, they import it, they make their move. So it's like correspondence chess, if you like. That was a lot less interesting than it could have been. That was also down to me, but I realized that this is not my kind of game. And I've also have to say I don't really like playing board games online. With the exception of Elder Sign Omens, which is actually not the board game being played online, but it's the board game idea implemented as an app, and that's very different, and that's actually quite enjoyable. But while all of this is available, I mean, for card games, you could use Lackey. Lackey has a Lord of the Rings LCG implementation, and of course, you've got I don't even know what it's called or how to pronounce it. It's spelled OCTGN, Octogen, I believe, is how they call it. It's also a LCG table, a virtual table, and I think almost everything for Lord of the Rings LCG has been implemented. And there are loads of implementations of different games there where you actually have the virtual cards and you can either watch someone else play, you can play on your own, and I suppose you can also play against someone. I've never tried that. I've really tried to play the Lord of the Rings LCG with Octogen because it's much easier to build decks, because I don't have to sleeve cards. I don't have to, like tear apart the deck that I have at the moment because I'm still playing the Saga expansion, so I can't really experiment with the live deck because it needs to stay as it is because it's working so far, touch wood. But it just doesn't grab me. I find it terribly cumbersome, and I don't know. I just don't like it. I can't get myself to play board games online. But that's just my personal preference. So, but if this is your thing, and if you're able to do this well, and I know a lot of people do play board games online, and there is a whole series, the progression series for the Lord of the Rings LCG. I think it's done by the 10th Nazgul, and you can find it on YouTube, where he actually uses Octogen only and he plays through all of those scenarios. Now, I actually don't like watching that as much as I like watching someone really take out the cards and smash them on the table, and here's a shadow card and another shadow card, and flipping cards. I love how Glaurung does it, although unfortunately hasn't made a video in a long while now. That's sad, but hey. But again, if this is your thing, and if you are really into your computers, then of course the modern age allows you to do lots of things. And I would say the same goes for a lot of out-of-print titles, because you can still get stuff for them. So for example, I've got a game called Citadel. It's almost as old as I am, and it is a game about the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. And somebody has made a new implementation of the game using the chits and using the map, but he has changed a lot of how the game plays, because I think his problem was that he thought it was historically not accurate. I personally don't like the game. I think that they tried to stick in too much. They should have maybe, for the I mean, with historical board games, there is always a problem. How much historicity can you have in the game without destroying the fact that it's supposed to be a game? Because a war game will always be an abstraction, because you don't have two sides of men clashing and fighting for that trench over there, or if it's more of a strategic game, you don't have the armies marching. You have a map, sometimes a really, 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 really big map, and you have chits and you have to move them around. And there has to be the idea of, yes, this is still a game. And if it is a game, and again, this is probably a discussion for another day, but if it's a historical war game, and if it's, let's say, Thermopylae, we know what happened. In the end, they all died. They took a lot of the Persians with them, but they lost. Or Marathon. So what happens then? Should the historical outcome always be the only outcome that's possible in this game? Because obviously you're playing a historical battle, so should it always just end in one way, or should you have the possibility of changing the ending? And of course, with a historical war game, I think the balance can be a bit difficult to strike. And I had this discussion with somebody who said, "Oh, I'd like to play the Great Battles of Alexander, but I don't really want Alexander to win. I want to have like an implementation of real hoplite warfare." And I said, okay, well, in that case, just take the chits and the maps and just put together your armies and just let them clash, and see what happens. Don't follow the setup, and don't follow maybe any particular battle rules that are trying to simulate certain things that happened at a certain Battle of Alexander, but just take the chits, take the values on the counters, roll a couple of dice. But then you will not be playing Great Battles of Alexander. You'll be playing Great Hoplite Warfare, which is fair enough. It's up to you. You can do whatever you like. But don't be fooled into thinking you are now rewriting history, because the way the battles are set up in the Alexander Deluxe, for example, do try to simulate what actually happened. And there, of course, you have the fine line between what is a game and what is a simulation. And I remember playing Cruel Necessity because I love the victory points games like Habsburg Eclipse, Ottoman Sunset, and of course the Rorke's Drift. I really, really love them. And so I thought, okay, well, this is a bigger one now. And it's about Britain. And it was just a total disaster, because the person, I read somewhere later that the person who had actually put this together was a history teacher. And it kind of shows. I don't know if this is actually true, but if it is, then it does show, because he put in so many variables and so many things that could possibly happen that it was really not a game. You were basically trying to firefight all the time, which is not the problem, but all your choices suddenly became meaningless, because you kind of had, I can't even remember the details, but you had a number of zeal points that you could use to do something. So basically you have, let's say, a counter for Catholicism and unrest. So how are the Catholics in your empire doing? Are they happy? Are they unhappy? So basically certain events will change their happiness factor. So of course you don't want them to go completely unhappy, because this could lead to unrest. So you try to mitigate this by rolling dice. Okay, yeah, you do have to have some form of mitigation mechanism, and they decided on dice rolling, which is fair enough. So I rolled a die. Okay, I fail. Next round, they again descend into unhappiness. I have one zeal point left over. I don't really have anything else meaningful to do, so I'll try to calm down the Catholics. I rolled a die. Again, doesn't work. It was just so totally unrelated. I mean, you had those cards that say, okay, now Catholics are unhappy because blah, blah, blah. Such and such an event happened. They dropped by 2 places. That's fair enough. But that's a simulation. You simulate real events, which makes sense. But then you are left with this zeal point idea. So you try to do everything at once. You try to fight off groups, you try to defend cities, and then, yes, the pesky Catholics. So let's roll a die. Oops, again, it didn't make any difference. So it just felt that he was trying to do too much. You had the Catholics, and I think you had the Protestants. They had their separate tracks. And, there was too much in that one game. And that just made it completely unwieldy. Um, and I really can't recommend the game because I think he was trying to do too much. So again, we now have such a huge amount of games as well, of all different types, catering to different people: solo gamers, group gamers, online gamers, people who are into certain themes, people who are into certain mechanics, um, and also a plethora of support materials. Like, almost every company has the rules online. When you go on Board Game Geek, for most games, you can find fan made expansions, fan made materials, player boards, additional cards, even just check out Runebound. You have the Cities of Adventures variant. You have Lord Skeletor's solo variants, where he covers every single card ever printed for the second edition. It's all there. You have, for older games, even errata. I mean, I've got one game which is 30 years old and it's still in good nick. But you know, you go online and you find all of those, oh yeah, an errata here, and this is a bit strange in the original rulebook. You might want to read it this way. There is just a lot of material out there. So people who are hobbying and hobby gamers really now push the hobby out and provide everybody else with information. And I think this is, and what's the beauty about this is as well, they don't make any money. They do this for free. And I think this is really a phenomenon which a lot of people think about and kind of go, there is all this energy and innovative spirit out there, and people are doing this for free. They just want other people to enjoy. And I think this is how the internet can support people's ability and wish to give back. You know, gamers want to give back. They enjoy their gaming, they enjoy their experience, and they would like to share it. And I suppose this is something that you couldn't have in a non-internet society. So, do I believe that this is the golden age? I think it is definitely not the Bronze Age. I don't know if it's the golden age, but I would definitely say, as far as I'm concerned, I couldn't wish for a better age for me as a person, because I love solo gaming. There are plenty of solo games out there now that I can choose from. I don't have to make up a solo rule or rule set in order for me to be able to get my gaming in. I'm able to connect to people. I enjoy making videos, and the fact that we have YouTube allows me to make videos really, really easily. There is very good video software out there. Even the software that I'm using now could be used for streaming. It's called OBS Studio 0.16 for Windows. And it's a really, really good piece of software, which I can use to do my podcasting. And that one's free. My video software isn't free. I bought that. But even like getting a video camera these days is quite cheap. And I just enjoy gaming in all its forms. And I also love watching other people game. And that is something that I can do now. And I also have a community which I don't necessarily have where I live. Because while I have friends that I game with, you all know this, and they all only play RPGs. They don't really play board games. So that's a bit sad. And I would so love to play Lord of the Rings LCG with someone at some point. But I'm afraid this is probably not going to happen in my personal situation because nobody's really interested. But that's fine. So we're definitely in the silvery age as far as I'm concerned. And I can see the games market going from strength to strength, both with re-implementing themes and topics, but also trying to come up with new combinations of existing mechanics to keep it fresh, and also bringing in new things, maybe making hybrid games, like, for example, the app-driven games, which I have no problem with. Actually, I actually like it, and I think both Road to Legend and Mansions of Madness Second Edition are really well implemented, and the gaming experience is really great. And of course, using OBS Studio, I could, for example, make a video using the streaming part to record the actual app and then intersplice it with a video. And I'm going to try this probably around Christmas. So that's all from me. I wish you all a pleasant bank holiday weekend and hope to talk to you soon. Bye bye.